Today is the 5th day of March 2014, and I'm very, very happy to have my daughter here. Chali, welcome.
Thank you.
A few things that Chali obviously doesn't remember that I shall tell you. When she was 1 year old, Udar took her up to Mother and sat her in Mother's lap. And Mother said two things, but I can only remember one. And that was that she said, "Very wise." So, Shally, no one has talked to us about the education at Equals One, how it was formed, Ivan, Medananda, Fausto, who I know you loved so much as a teacher. Could you tell us a bit about the history of Equals One or your experience with it?
I don't think that I'm the right person to talk about the history very much, but I can try to share some of the experiences that I remember. Where to start? As far as I remember, I was there from, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, from about the age of 7 till 10 when I went to Cody school. And my memories of Equals One are that it was, that we went there during the week and went back home on the weekends. There were the teacher who I remember the most and who I think was there the longest was a Colombian man named Fausto. Most of the time, as far as I remember, it was Yvonne and Medananda lived in one building in an apartment where Fausto had his place initially, I think, and where one of the most memorable aspects of Equals One and Yvonne and Medananda were also housed, which were how many? 4 monkeys, and I guess they were the macaques, I think.
Maybe. Yeah.
Black. They were the black macaques
yeah.
with the whitish face, if I remember. And there were, I think, 3 females and 1 male. The male was named Plato, and these monkeys were one of the aspects of going to school in this alternative school that we all loved and remembered. Just to give a little, one of the memories I have of Plato actually was, he was very much the male monkey with his harem, so you had to be a little bit careful around him. But one day when we were the kids, I think there were anywhere from 3 to at most maybe 7 kids at one time. And one day we were all going past the window of the room that he was in, and he reached out through the bars of the window and grabbed my hair very gently. It wasn't in an aggressive way. He just kind of reached over and pulled me towards him, and then started inspecting my head for any unwanted guests. So that was one of the.
Do you remember why Ivan was so interested in monkeys?
I don't.
I can't remember also.
I don't at all. But she had these particular monkeys from the time that we all came into the school, and when we left, she still had them. And in fact, many years later, when I came for a visit in '85. Yeah, I came back for a visit in '85, and by that time, Medananda was very old, and he was very not well, and basically restricted to his bed. and they had moved to a place near Lake Estates, if I'm not mistaken, and we actually went there to visit them and to reconnect or just to say hello, and the monkeys were still there. They still had the monkeys, so there was a very deep bond and connection, but I don't know. I don't know where.
What was the educational system like as you remembered it as a child?
Very student-centered, very free. It was more activity-based. I mean, Equals One, as far as I remember, it was an experimental school. It was related to, of course, connected to the ashram, but not part of the ashram school as such. We would go, I think, once a week and use the ashram library, and at one point, mainly the school was located in the building where I think Dilip owns it now, near where the Oroville kitchen was, behind Romain Rolland Library. And so the schooling, we had a whole floor, actually 2 floors there, and the schooling was very individualized. We had certain times of the day that we would do reading. We could choose whatever we wanted to read and just sit quietly. That was generally after lunch. We did have some math, but actually that was one of the things that was very weak, and that I still feel had something to do with the fact that I always struggled in math. I don't know if you remember sessions. I remember a session in Cody, sitting in the coffee shop, where Narad is trying to help me to learn how to do mathematical processes in my head, or very simple things, and I was in tears. It was so hard for me, and I think that was, I mean, not to put blame anywhere, but I think that this was something that was lacking that made things
What were the real
But
positives?
one thing that I really remember very well, and that actually is used in Auroville schools now, is the Sandbox play, or some people call it Sandbox therapy, some people call it play. There are many different aspects and values, I think, to it, and we did that already at Equals One, where, I mean, just to give a brief explanation, there's a tray, a sand tray, basically, and there are all different objects that are available to the person, and you choose what you want and how and you place it in any way that you feel, and you arrange this tray. You can move the sand, and then Fausto, who was actually quite an accomplished artist, would make sketches and drawings of the Sandbox images that we created. And that was something that we all really enjoyed, and that I think was did have educational value and value for, as far as for them now as an adult looking back, for them it must have also, for the adults, it must have had value in gaining insight into what was happening inside of us as children who couldn't necessarily express ourselves very clearly, maybe.
Before we fast forward to Auroville, and maybe Fausto, you could talk a little bit about him. But I wanted to ask you if you have any remembrances of Mother. I think you said that we took you to the last darshan.
I think I remember, because, I mean, I'll explain that statement in a minute, but I remember being at a darshan which must have been her last one. And what I remember very strongly is, and I must have been, if it was her last darshan, that was 72,
73.
early 73 maybe.
August 73 was the last darshan.
Okay. So then I was 6. And what I remember is being on the street, and of course, I mean, everything quiet, everyone looking up, and she was looking down, but it wasn't as if it was a scan like this. It was as if there was a beam of focus on individuals that was so powerful that even as a child it felt like I was the only person she was aware of, and I'm sure, I mean, I think almost everyone had that experience. But that is a very powerful memory for me, so it must have been something.
You said that you recalled something else of Mother, whether it happened in vision or in reality. I'd like you to share that.
I'm smiling at this one because a lot of my life I had an image of a scene with Mother, where I was in her room with her, but alone, just she and me. And when I described this to my mom at one point, she said, "I don't remember that. I don't think that happened." I said, "No, but I mean, it's not. There's no photo of this, or there's nothing. But no, I remember it. It happened. No, but children weren't allowed to go in alone, so it couldn't have happened." I'm like, "No, but I remember it so clearly." So I don't know anymore whether. I mean, it's also Narad was suggesting that it might have been possible that Udar had taken me from my mom at one point and said, "Oh, let's go in," and which is very possible that he would have or could have done. And I know I spent quite a bit of time with Udar when I was little. But I mean, what I remember was just, I mean, a very simple. It's nothing earth-shattering. It was a simple scene of being in her room with her. She's sitting in her chair, and she has a table with a bowl of fruit next to her, and there were bananas in this bowl of fruit. And I asked if I could have a banana, and she smiles and says, "Of course." And then I think somebody was actually there to hear me ask, and they were a bit like, "No, you shouldn't ask," that kind of reaction. But I was a little kid and didn't see anything wrong with it, and Mother also didn't seem to see anything wrong with it. So
well, I'm full of questions about Fausto, about Udar. Maybe those two first. Remembrances of Udar and Fausto.
Udar he was always, it seems to be, I mean, I don't remember our first meetings myself because I was too young. But I've seen pictures of Udar holding me when I'm a baby, and one of my favorites is it's in the book on Udar also, where he always wore this rose. And this I remember the smell of, like, this association of the smell of a rose and Udar. And he's holding me, and I'm reaching for the rose.
For the rose.
But this connection continued. It wasn't just something that existed when I was a child. When I came back for that visit in '85, I came to see him when I moved back to Oroville I came in '94, and then I moved back end of '94, summer of '94, '95.
I think so. Yeah.
And would go and visit him quite regularly, and there was always a sense of closeness or an affinity. And in fact, many years later, when Jan, who's the father of my two boys, we had a marriage ceremony and with some friends, and Udar, I had read the text that Udar would occasionally read for people who wanted to take this step, but without necessarily the legal process. And I very much liked that. And he actually agreed to come all the way to, we had the ceremony on some land. It was Dilip and Jacqueline also had their ceremony at the same time, and they have this land near Maracanam on the beach. So we had the ceremonies there, and Udar came all that way in a car, and he must have been around close to 80, so in his late 70s, I guess, and to read this text and participate in that ceremony. He came with Pushpa and Lilu also.
Oh.
I have a beautiful photo of Pushpa and me at that ceremony, and I think I have pictures of him also if you'd want to see them. So that was my connection, my relationship with Udar.
And Fausto.
Fausto, he was always someone who I felt. I mean, I always had a very good contact with him. The memories I have of him as a teacher were that he was creative, caring, very present, of course, because we all lived. It was basically boarding during the weekend, so he was our primary caregiver during that time. He would pile us all on his cycle, like one in the front, one on the handlebars, two on the rack in the back, and take us around the corner for a treat or something. He when Equals One disbanded, I think he left. I didn't have much contact with him for a long time after that, and then we left Auroville, and he had left the area also.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the exact times of his departure. But at one point he somehow found out where I was when we were in the States, and he, out of the blue, I got a birthday card from him. And from that point on, we reconnected, and we would have a regular communication. And at one point, when Jan and I were in Europe, we actually went to visit Fausto in Switzerland, where he still lives, I think, in Bern. And it was a very good experience and interesting for me, because I had only known him as a child. So, as a child, you have a certain perspective of adults and memories of what they look like and how big they are, so I always, of course, imagined Fausto as much bigger than me, but he was actually, then when we met, he was actually really a small man. I think he was even a little bit shorter than me. He looked exactly the same. He sounded exactly the same. The vibration and the connection was the same. But it was like all of the sizes the perspective had changed, it was an interesting. I mean, mentally that that's how it is, but then to face it so directly, and it took me by surprise, but it was a very nice reconnection.
So let's go now to Auroville in those early days. I'd like to ask you a very personal question, and that is, have you felt Mother's guidance in your educational work? Building the high school with Luke, when there was no high school in Auroville at all. This was the high school. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Do you want me to focus first on whether I've felt Mother's guidance?
Yeah.
Yes. Always. Sometimes more intensely, sometimes more directly, sometimes, but it's always, for me there's always that presence, that that point of aspiration. I don't even want to use the word inspiration because it's not strong, not deep enough. There are times when, to try to express how that is and how that feels, or how I experience that. For me, the choice to come back to Auroville was very conscious as an adult, which maybe I can tell a little side story about that after. And therefore, for me, it's a given. It's if you make that choice, then her presence is a part of that, and it's there. The specific kinds of moments where it's more intense or more direct, more conscious, let's say. I know that there have been moments where I've just seen her smiling and laughing. Usually, of course, when I feel positive and optimistic, and or when something has happened that which has been often, that there have been moments where we whether it was Luke and me in the early years or others along the more recent years, when something has been needed or something, it's clear that something has to change or move or happen, and we try in our conscious and intentional and mental to some extent way, and it just doesn't work. What we need isn't coming. And then at a certain point you have to say, okay, I've done what I can. Now we let it go and surrender and see. And if it's meant to happen, something will come up, and if not, we have to change our direction or focus. And many, many, many times what's been needed does come, and in some form or another, and in those moments, I definitely send my gratitude, and usually the picture that I have is that she's smiling. Sometimes a little bit mischievous, kind of, well, see, have faith, trust. Of course, there are times that are very challenging, that I'm struggling to know how to go on in a certain direction, what decisions to make, if any, how I should be, how my attitude should be, when actually you said something to me once that I have applied quite often. So I call sometimes for help. And when I was in the working committee, very often, it became almost a daily prayer, mantra, appeal. And in fact, this is the word that you suggested to me, was just my appeal. But also,
I actually got that from Amal Kiran, that term, because I asked him a question about poetry. And I said, Amal, when you feel a line is not correct, and you're not supposed to use your mind, what do you do? And very quietly, with a big smile, he said, appeal. And then he said, if you are patient, there will always be an answer. So that's where appeal came from. Not mine, but his.
Even better. Then it gets even stronger. And it does work for me. It helps me. Another thing that was very, that I do try to say to myself often, sometimes, in fact, we were talking about this as we came in, that we have to remember, related to being not the sculptor but the clay. And related to this, one thing that has helped me is just to say to myself, one of the phrases that I remember, make me an instrument, make me a better instrument, and to remind myself that I have to sometimes step away from what I think the result should be or how things should happen, and let forces wiser and more powerful and wider than me direct me in the right way.
Can we begin with the evolution of higher education in Oroville? How you had the inspiration for the school, etc., for the high school?
It actually, I don't even know if I can go so far as to say it was an inspiration. It was when I first moved back to Auroville, which maybe now would be a good time just to tell this little side story I mentioned, because I think you know about this, but when I had come back to Auroville for a month for a visit with no intention to live here again or come back to stay, and I hadn't been here in 8 years before that. And but I was in a period where I knew something major had to change in my life. Everything was okay. In the States, everything was okay. My job was okay. My life was okay. But
you had a degree in biology?
I had a degree in biology. I was working in a research lab in a hospital. I really liked my boss. We got along very well. She gave me a lot of autonomy. It wasn't paid well, but it was okay. It was enough to support myself, and I had a partner who, who loved me, and we had a beautiful dog and a cat, and a little apartment, and so it was all okay. But there was something, I felt like something had to change. So I came to Auroville for 1 month for a visit, and very quickly I realized, or I felt that this was the change that I needed to make, and that it was time to come back here. So I went back to the US to quit my job and give my boss time to find somebody else, and to talk to my parents,
And asked if we would give our blessings, and we both did. We felt this was the right thing.
But what was interesting was that I mentioned Mom picked me up from the airport,
Mm-hmm.
and I told her right away when we were driving back. And I really wasn't sure how either of you would feel. I mean, I didn't think you would say no. We don't want you to do that, but I didn't really know what your reaction would be. And Mom said something that was really touching, and that was unexpected, actually, for me, which was that she said that although she would really miss me, because we would be halfway around the world, sorry. She said that she was glad that I had made that choice, because she had always wondered if she had made a mistake.
Auroville was very, very difficult in those days. Mary Helen stayed almost 12 years and suffered greatly from the assaults of people, the difficulty of the climate, the fact that we almost never had enough food. Electricity was a very rare commodity, and her nature was so gentle and sensitive. As Langston Hughes says in one of his poems, the two rough fingers of the world were too much for her, and we went back. So,
And what she expressed in that connection was also the fact that because Auroville was so rugged, that she always wondered whether it was wrong of her to have imposed her decision on me as a child, since I didn't have a choice in being there and growing up in Auroville. Which took me completely by surprise, because my memories of growing up in Auroville were
great.
I mean, I don't know if idyllic is the right word, but definitely fun, lots of independence, freedom, being out in nature, running around barefoot all the time. swimming in the mud holes. I mean, what is there to regret? But of course now, as a parent myself, although the conditions in Auroville are much, much, much more comfortable, I can imagine that for you and for my mom, it must have been very, very difficult. So I can understand why she had that doubt and concern, but I hadn't thought about it myself, of course, and this was before I had my own children. So anyway, that was the little side story. Sorry. The school. The school was something that, I mean, when I moved back to Auroville, I did various things, just trying out to see where I wanted to be and what I wanted to be involved in. And education was something that I never, ever imagined I would be involved in. When I was in university, my faculty advisor had even said, "Why don't you take some courses in education?" No way, no chance, no nothing doing. Not me. And so, yeah, this is one of the moments when I think there was some laughing going on up there, because this is what I've ended up being involved in for almost 20 years now. And if education, it never would have been with teenagers, and that's exclusively what the age group I've been involved in. So it happened sort of, I mean, through a friend who suggested that I talk to another young Aurovillian who had come as a young child and gone through his experiences of education or lack of education in Auroville, and he had done self-study and found the teachers and found a program and found the materials and had the motivation and had the discipline to do that. But of course not all teenagers, and in fact the majority of teenagers, aren't going to have that capacity. So he had his experience and I had had mine of being in equals one, and then that stopping, and then not really much happening in education in Auroville. So then I went to Cody School, then we left, went to high school in the US, etc. And Luke had an idea to start some kind of educational center, a learning center, but then it died, and because there wasn't energy, there wasn't funds. So this mutual friend suggested that we start working on this together. So we did, just kind of, sure, why not? A very casual undertaking in the beginning, I have to admit. And we, we had to write a project proposal, find the funding, get the building renovated and usable. And actually, I think the main reason why we not only started but continued and carried it forward was because we were having so much fun. He and I just got along so well. It was really another situation where there's clearly, even today, we both feel that there is a connection on some level between us that we don't understand. It's, when you call somebody your soul sister or soul brother, that's what we feel we are. And I think it was almost in the beginning more that than anything else that kept us working on it, because we were enjoying it. We knew that it was something that was needed also. So all these years, I think that has been actually one of the aspects that's helped it to grow, and the fact that it was growing the project was growing, and it was something that was obviously needed and appreciated by the community at large. And at the same time, the growth that I've gone through has been huge. I don't know what has been bigger, in fact, or deeper, the growth of this project, the school, or what it's done to me.
Can you tell a little bit about teachers, curriculum, number of students in the beginning, and number of students today and next year?
Well, in the very beginning, the initial concept was just a learning center. It wasn't at that time focusing on any particular age group, or especially not teenagers. It was, if you can call it an educational matchmaking center. So the idea was that anybody in Auroville could come to us saying, I would like to learn macrame, or chemistry, or whatever, or even some small concept, scientific concept, or whatever it may have been, or a language. And we would try to put them in touch with someone in the community who could teach that. So it was more to be someone in a go-between, and that's why I say a matchmaker, that we would take requests and then also try to have a database or a list of people who could offer various things and connect these two. So this was how it started. After a couple of years, we realized that it was too broad and that we were trying to cover too many areas, and decided that for us, the real need and the most important aspect of the areas that we were trying to cover was to provide some kind of alternative for teenagers. At that time, last school existed, but there had been some difficulties some years before, and because of its approach, which is very much that the student decides what they want to do, when they want to do it, how they want to do it, all of these things. And there isn't really a structured system of evaluation of any kind. That it's great that it exists, and it's great for certain students. It's really the right approach, but for many it's not. And so at that time, there were many, in fact, the majority of teenagers were out of Auroville. They were in the Lycée Français. I think there were about 15 or 20 in the Lycée. There were another 15 or 20 in Cody School, and scattered around different parts of India, or not in school at all. And so we felt, okay, this is what we should focus on. We actually interviewed a lot of the students of that age group who were out of Auroville, and asked them why. I mean, why were you out? What's missing? What is Auroville not giving you that you are looking for? And of course, the majority of the students said that they wanted to have doors available. I mean, they wanted to have keys to open doors, whatever it may be. Whether they might stay in Auroville, they might stay in the area, but they wanted to have the possibility of going out, having an experience, going on into university education or some other more formal education. And that just wasn't possible with what existed at that time. So we felt that, okay, that's what they say they need. How to do that, and the reality also is that in Auroville and in the ashram also, the aim is to provide a different kind of education that isn't, of course, aimed at and focusing on and for certificates and diplomas and exams and these things. on the other hand, if all of the kids of that age are out, we didn't see how we can try to develop something new, a different approach or a different kind of program without those people being a part of it, that that age group being a part of it. It didn't make sense. So we looked at how we can try to provide what they felt they need, to invite them and encourage them to stay in Auroville so that they would be a part of this exploration and discovery and experimentation, acknowledging the realities of the world out there. So we looked around and we decided to, this is related to the program and the curriculum, that we eventually chose to offer the students the possibility, without it making it a requirement, of taking an international series of exams if they felt that this was something they needed. So the program that we have now has evolved over all of these years in order to try to address and incorporate and respect the aims and ideals of integral education, and Auroville as the context, but at the same time allowing the students to choose within that to get the keys that they need to go anywhere that they feel they need to go. Because we've seen a generation, and more than one generation in fact, of kids who've grown up there who didn't have these possibilities, who felt trapped, who stayed in Auroville because they felt they didn't have any other choice, who didn't have the confidence. And that's no real choice. That's no way to be, full stop. And so this is a controversial aspect of our school. And even within the school, it is often something that has to be, we have to stay very conscious of the place that we want to keep this and the importance that it is given or not, which is a struggle. It's a challenge because, of course, as human beings, it's easier to fall back on what's known, what's given, what's already created. It's much easier to use that than to try to adapt or even create something new. So it's challenging, but we feel, now the evolution of the school is the appreciation, the demand is growing and growing every year. We started off as this tutoring center for teenagers, and we had just 3 students in the beginning, and then a couple of years later jumped suddenly to about 20, and over the years we've steadily grown. In 2001 we moved to another campus, to a new facility, and this year we have 72 teenagers, and next year we'll have 90. So I think, the challenges and the work that we have to do to try to keep this balance is it's there, and it's always going to be a challenge. But I think that it's obviously meeting a need.
What subjects are taught?
Oh,
I know there's a lot of languages in that much.
two sides, A4 sides on the list. We have all the usual academic subjects, all of the sciences, English, math, history, economics, geography, so all of the usual suspects. and at different levels. We also have things like some technical computer-based subjects, networking, robotics. We have writing classes. Akash Kapoor comes and gives a writing class once a week, which is very good. We have art classes, filmmaking, photography. We have fashion design. We have Thai boxing before school. We have body awareness before school. We have, these are all for the students to choose. There's very little that's required as such. It really depends on what they have in mind for themselves for their future. We have, for the first year students, we also have a community service requirement that all of the first year students have to do 3 weeks of community service, and they rotate through 3 different places in Auroville where they work. There is something that we call core class, which is a series of different topics that they cover through the first year and a half about. And it's things like study skills, road safety, personal safety, which is a bit of a euphemism, and study skills like note-taking, things like that, kind of practical, but also thinking, organizing their thinking and then debating it. There's something within that, and then that they can continue afterwards as an elective, something that we call Oroville Philosophy, which is basically in the beginning it's more of a discussion-based course that talks about Auroville, Auroville's history a little bit, its aims and ideals. I think they read The Dream together and kind of talk about that. But it's really to just get the students to think about what Auroville is meant to be about, what it was intended for, and their relationship to it. To think about it, to talk about it. And then later, if they want to continue, then they do more reading. They'll read passages in this introductory level, but later they'll do more in-depth reading and discussion.
Of Mother
and Aurobindo's different things that have been written, and what else?
Languages?
Languages. We have, of course, we have, I think right now, seven languages that are offered. Spanish, Italian, French, German, Hindi, Tamil, English, of course, is everybody takes. And then once in a while there are people who ask for their mother tongue, for example, like Hebrew or Dutch or Russian, and then we try to bring in people who can do that one-on-one. So, this is an aspect of, the school in general, we try to provide a basic structure, especially for the youngest group, but then within that to allow freedom and choice and flexibility, and the older that they get and the more confident and comfortable and mature they become, they have more and more freedom and flexibility, but of course by that time we hope that they've understood that also requires more responsibility and self-discipline and self-motivation. So we also have a mentor system. In order for the students to make these choices, we put in place, very, very much in the beginning, a mentor system where the students choose one of us as their mentor advisor. So this person just stays in touch with them regularly, is there to answer questions if there's a conflict with a teacher, or if there's a conflict with another student, or if other teachers see that that something seems to be off, or that then they would go to the mentor and say, hey, listen, it seems like this person is struggling, or is everything okay? And then they contact the parents, or it's kind of just a direct support person. And this person will also help them with their course choices and
That's quite a
anything
lot.
else?
That's quite a lot. It's a wonderful session, almost an hour. Thank you, Chali. It was excellent.
enough?
Yeah, wonderful.